Hello everyone, my name is David Gruber. I am an industry analyst and I work for a company called the Enterprise Strategy Group. And for any of you who don't know what an industry analyst is, I focus on the cybersecurity industry, studying what's happening in the industry, both what practitioners are doing in the industry, what vendors have and are doing and are offering. And I sort of am a matchmaker a little bit, so I help pull the pieces together between what's happening on the user side, and I help guide vendors, therefore, to deliver innovations, features, capabilities, and things that live on top of that. Jordan, my friend over here, is my room monitor person, who was just telling me that it would have been fun to have some live music in here. This is the end of the show. I feel like everybody's like winding down. I want to just say up front, thanks for choosing me, as you're all kind of scattered here. I'm curious about why people showed up at this session, but let me start out by saying like the point of this session, just to prove that whether you stay or you want to go, this is about me taking a hard look at what's going on in the industry. And I'm going to share that with you, what other companies are doing around the subject of generative AI, both from the utilization of it in their organization, what they're worried about, what they're doing, what people are doing around governance and policies, and what some of the cybersecurity strategies are, at least early on, because we all know that it's early days. And so this is a little bit of a different session than some others that might be how-to sessions. This is the how-to part of this is your ability to potentially model after what others are doing in the industry. So I always find it helpful to see what my peers are doing. You may too. And so looking for information about what the major trends are, which way the wind's blowing in the industry, tends to help you guide some of your own strategies, or at least check against what other trends are that are going on in the industry. So I'm going to focus on four things in this session. The first one is going to be about what the organizations that I've surveyed, and there's about 400 companies involved in this survey, what people believe the potential is, the opportunities are. The second piece is about what specific actions are being taken around governance. And governance is a big topic for everybody. You're all probably thinking about it in your organizations too. What people feel like, or basically what people are worried about. I will commonly talk about that as risks, but some of this is subjective, some of it's objective, so we'll see sort of both sides of that when it comes to both the use of generative AI technologies and systems in their own organizations, so those that have app dev teams that are leveraging and building on it, and then the general user population in their companies and what people are concerned about. And then the last piece, a little shorter piece, just what people are telling, at least me, that they're looking for in security vendors. It's like, which security vendor am I going to trust? So, and it's not going to be a list of what those vendors are, but more about what are those capabilities that vendors want to bring to the table that are going to help me make a decision on which of all the vendors that were on the floor today, which have the right fit when it comes to generative AI tooling that's inserted into their cybersecurity solutions. So a couple of quick stats here, and a lot of this is stats, but I'm just going to translate it into sort of what the big takeaways are here. And some of the numbers are a little small for those of you that are in the way back. But this is just sort of generally, there's a fairly pervasive set of security concerns about the use of generative AI, and this is not unlike other innovative, big tech innovation things that have happened in the world, where the lack of knowledge or the lack of visibility into what the risks are cause a lot of concerns around it. So as such, people are being a little resistant to things, and you see 86% of organizations have blocked access to one or more generative AI sites. Most everybody is concerned about the data leakage, and if you walk the show floor or attended lots of other sessions, you know that data privacy sensitive data leakage is a giant concern for everybody. And then like the big issue for people is they don't know what's going on, because there's a huge amount of generative AI consumption of end users that security teams just have no visibility in, because we don't have the tools to give us the visibility for that yet. The good news is I spent my week this week not here at the show floor, but talking to all the different security vendors about providing better visibility, providing approachable security controls to take care of many of these issues. The big concerns on people's minds around offensive concerns on the offense side of the equation. So what are we worried that the adversary is or might be doing? Again, this is much a visibility issue, but the general concern about my attack surface is, as always, this becomes another less visible part, less understood of part of my attack surface. So I'm sort of desperate for some visibility and some knowledge about what's happening there. So I'm worried about the stuff that we're doing. That's the we use part of this. But I also worry about upstream for me and downstream. So my supply chain and my partner connectivity too, and the potential impact on the pull-through from their attack surface, that those threats get pulled through into my environment and my world. The third big concern is around the deep fake issue, and as we saw in this Sandbox Innovation earlier this week, that the winner of that was the company that was focused on solving this problem about solving deep fakes and realistic voice, realistic image impersonations for socially engineered fraud type activities. Just in general, there's a sort of ton of squirrely concern on the phishing front, and also like the adversary being able to get a lot of mileage out of using generative AI to like mix up like really believable phishing type techniques, and the pace and of being able to do that, and will the security controls and the vendors who many of which I spoke with this week are going to be capable of keeping up to sort of hold that at bay. And then lastly, on the addition of net new malware strains, the unknowns so far, again, we understand little about this environment, so it'll take us a little time to get on top of that. Enough said about where the concerns are. That was really just a setup to be able to say defenders are pretty optimistic. There's lots of opportunities for how we as defenders can apply these capabilities within our environments. And I don't know about you, but I walked the show floor a little bit, like for maybe 30, 40 minutes, and just sort of looked at what people were demonstrating for leveraging generative AI type capabilities, interactive capabilities in their solutions and systems. And most all the security vendors brought something to the table here today, which, how many of you were here last year at the show? So, and who remembers, like, what was the big topic last year? Same, right? Generative AI, except last year it was a story. This year it's like we brought some value to bear here. It's still early days. We're still barely scratching the surface here, but the majority of organizations, 75%, say they're already actively using in their security environments some level of generative AI capabilities. And for many, these are like really simple, basic interactive functions to help out with a number of sort of key areas. And see, these are the top 5 areas of focus where people are applying generative AI capabilities today. Number 1 throughout the survey was the focus on improving security hygiene and posture. What does that term mean? So that means that we're going to use generative AI to pick apart all the different vulnerabilities, flaws in my attack surface, rogue devices, unknown aspects of my attack surface, and give me that visibility and help me focus on how to prioritize which pieces of that have the most risk, and so I can shut down and tighten that up and reduce my attack surface. So that's that sort of general hygiene and posture management, is I want to make sure that I have the coverage that I need, and this is a tool that helps me basically analyze more data faster and make those priority decisions so I can go do that. Lots of vendors brought that to the show. That's terrific to see that this week. This survey data was actually created about 90 to 100 or so days ago. So it's good that we're generally in sync here. The second big focus point, and lots of the vendors have been talking about this week, is helping the junior security analyst out. And don't be embarrassed. Well, I'll ask this the other way. How many of you are super senior security types? Like, you're practitioners with many years of experience and you're experts. And how many of you are junior people? We'll go the other, if you're not too embarrassed to raise your hand, but on the junior side. So that puts everybody else in the middle. But this is all about helping up-level your capabilities through generative AI capabilities I had some interesting conversations. I went to some of the vendors' early show days, saw some demos, talked to a lot of customers who were using some of the Copilot and Copilot-like capabilities. And what I heard back was kind of fascinating, because there was a lot of focus here on, hey, you can take your tier 1 analyst and make them act like a tier 2 analyst, or you can make your tier 2 person operate like a tier 3 person. But when I dug into that, it was interesting. It was more about a learning process. It was through the interactive process, dealing with interactive interactions with the generative AI capabilities. People felt like it was a learning tool because it did the work for you, but then it showed you what the work was done. It analyzed a script, but broke it down on how to analyze that script and what the major capabilities were that someone was investigating. It showed the workflow that the generative AI engine went through to get to the conclusions that it got, and the thinking about the people, the actual end users of this that had their hands on the keyboard for the past 6 months or so was, that's really helping my people not just do one level up work, but learn faster about what they need to do and what the investigation process is, and how to analyze signals, how to assemble signals, and then how to come to conclusions about those signals. The tool set itself is sort of, in an assistive way, the way it's described, is helping people learn faster and get better. Something else that was disclosed to me that was kind of fascinating to me too was, one of the CISOs that I talked to said, hey, this is a side thing. I wrote a blog about this the other day, in that it helps me as I bring on junior security people that have little skills that I'm training. It helps me understand who has the acumen to do this job better by the way they react and interact with the generative AI capabilities. So sort of a different vector on like bringing people on board, but take 10 people, have them sit down, have them interact with these capabilities, monitor how well they're understanding the concepts that are being brought forward. It's sort of like shadowing a learning process. You're in a classroom and you're looking at your students and you're trying to say like, oh, so you look like you're really grokking all this stuff because you're getting what I'm talking about here, and you're over there like, doing your email, twiddling your thumbs, other things, like it's not clicking for you. And it's helping people tease out those people that actually, one, have the capabilities, but the interest and the drive, and it helped him sort some people out very quickly on the onboarding process. So I thought that was like a fascinating thing. I've never heard anybody really talking about that, but that was a good use case. Anyway, accelerating threat detection and response, of course, much of that is automation, like really basic automation, data enrichment use cases, like getting pre-sandbox activities done, getting script analysis done, all those sorts of little tiny automated functions that just take a lot of time for people. For you, the one person who is brave enough to say that you're an expert over there, like should help you to spend less time doing the crap work that you don't want to do, so you can focus on doing the things that you can use that big brain power to go do. Security technology consolidation. So I don't know how many examples you saw about some of the demos and things, but some of these assistants are able to go out and tap many, many data sources, so you don't have to. You're not writing queries for 5 separate data sources. The Gen AI engine LLM model is doing that for you. It's bringing the data together, so it helps you, sort of less swivel chair kind of a thing, but super, super helpful. So while technically not consolidating things, it's adding a layer on top of that, and then finally the sort of entry-level piece of it. So speaking more about automation, and part of some of the research that I'm doing now is what's the trajectory here of automation applications in cybersecurity and Gen AI, and like where is the intersection of that, and how much are we going to get out of generative AI in the automation front? And I'll just say about automation. Automation covers all aspects of sort of the whole process, from proactive security, attack surface exploration, so automating all of that all the way through to detection, through to investigations, and then automated responses. But so lots of activities there. So I wanted to know, like, where do people want to apply this technology? Because you can apply it in all these places. So of course, top of the list, security investigations. Most of that's about speed. It's about get to the decision faster, understand an incident faster, understand how to prioritize and take action on it faster. Orchestration across heterogeneous security controls, that's that consolidation agenda, and we see some real promise there. General process automation is anything across the sort of whole process. Case management, which is a pain in the ass if you're a security practitioner, just that whole communications process it's a necessary thing that you have to do. You want the results of it. It's just the activities themselves to get there is generally tedious and not fun, and this thing takes a lot of that off your plate. I love that. It helps you write reports, summarize things, communicate to super techie people or super non-techie people. It can do a lot of that work for you. Alert enrichment, a big use case I've seen already in many of the people I've talked to using these capabilities where by the time they see the alert, like it's already run through a bunch of automated enrichment processes, pulled in data, mapped it out against threat intel that you have in your organization, so you don't have to go do all that legwork on your own. And then the last one is sort of in the same vein as case management. It's actually the ticketing side of that equation. Now, I wanted to know, like, this sort of trust issue of if the assistant gives you recommendations, are you going to take action on them? Would you allow to the next step, which is automation, somebody was calling it semi-automated, I think, today or something like that I saw. Fully automated, semi-automated, or no automated. And like the lion's share of people said that they still want a staff member, would have to review the recommendation before taking action. And so many of the vendors are making that easy. They're pushing the recommendations from the AI assistants, and there's an easy button. It's like, do you want to do this? Push the button here to make it happen. But everybody still, for the most part, 71% want it to be reviewed by some level of staff member before they would execute it. So humans still in the loop on this one. But like my sense is, if this is as much a cultural issue as anything. I was having a conversation with a CISO earlier this morning, just about the whole cultural aspect. Like, as we all learn, remember the day when we all started getting just some like basic things like cell phones and smartphones, and then all of our IT systems sucked, but the smartphone stuff was really, really good, and it like had this pull-through effect, like what's possible. Like when we all learned what was possible to do in the small footprint of our smartphone, we started demanding more what came from our corporate systems. And I spent so long, I forget even there was some name for that. But I feel like the same thing is going to happen culturally with us all with this generative AI thing. As we all start to figure this out, as we all start to consume it and use it in our daily life, it's going to put us all in a very different position. We're very, we're skeptical in the security industry anyway about whether things do what people say that they do. So we need to have some experience. But I do feel like there's this human pull-through cultural experience that we're all going to go through over the next few years. And then we're going to see the possibilities of what's possible with generative AI. And it's going to change the whole game. It's going to change the conversation, change how we think about applying this. I think it's going to change the culture of security in a pretty big way over time. Long story short on that one, though, is for now, there's still a lot of concern and resistance. Humans got to stay in the loop until we learn how to trust this thing, and that's fair. There's still a lot of hallucination issues or other sort of quality-related issues in the results. Switching topics a little bit in the governance equation here. Now, how many of you have any sort of governance policies in your organizations today around generative AI use? That's pretty close to the representation of the numbers that I have too that are here. Did I slide? My slide didn't advance. Can I get some slide advance help there? Not sure what happened to my clicker. I'm trying. Well, I'll tell you that while he helps me figure this out, the governance is a real work in progress for most organizations. Less than 20% of the companies that we talked to had formalized governance activities on everybody's mind. So with all this worry, but establishing or formalizing that, I think I might have clicked an arrow key, which might have stopped that from going. Oh, there we go. Thank you. So only 10% of organizations said that they had formal governance structures in place today. Of those 10%, just a little quick breakout on the bottom here for larger companies tended to be those that were more advanced in their governance and policy work versus smaller companies which had very little there. When it comes to the actual actions that people are utilizing in governance policies, required training, so end user training for all aspects of the org. That includes basic end users, but also technical end users and engineering and development staff as well. Creating approval processes for the use of Gen AI, a vetting process for technology products that leverage or use or bring Gen AI into the organization, a pre-approval process that goes along with that, and then some type of risk assessment based on every Gen AI application in the organization, and then more formally creating acceptable use policies. So for most, this is still exploratory. This is a work in progress. There's a good session across the hall on how to do this, actually. I noticed competing with me, which is good. So things are starting to get written up about this. The NIST CSF will be publishing more on frameworks around creating governance policies here too, and with the CSF escalation of the govern capability, I think we'll see some good results there soon. When it comes to like asking organizations like what's the weakest part of this in your org today, third-party risk management was the biggest, top of the list. Data leakage protection was the second big issue or concern around governance. Regulatory compliance is just a general concern for people. There's a lot of regulatory policy work that's underway today. A lot of people are concerned about how that's going to affect people and then what kind of regulatory controls people are going to have to put in place. People's just general ability to enforce what's going on here. There's a lot of ways to end run policies in organizations. People have access to lots of devices from a lot of places. So there's a lot of just general concern about people evading whatever the governance and policies issues are. User awareness training. This is getting inserted into, if you already are utilizing security training and security controls training, this should get inserted into those same mechanisms too. So there's a fair amount of work underway in these places. I suspect with that, in the next 6 to 9 months, we'll see some very different results here. I have some recommendations towards the end. A couple of things on if your organization does formal application development, so you have engineers or developers, you're building software, you're building applications on your team, I wanted to know, like, so what's the expertise of that audience when it comes to policies and governance? And so what we wanted to say is, like, so what's the knowledge level or the acumen of the software development teams when it's related to the risks and concerns associated with Gen AI? 82% said yes. I think that's an optimistic number. I think probably most app devs have followed this space pretty well. But when it comes to actually thinking about, just like building secure applications, this has to get inserted into that whole conversation about how to build secure applications that leverage LLMs. I think there's a lot of work to be done here, and so despite the data says 82% say yes completely, understanding about the risks, I think that's probably an overstatement. When it comes to say, have you done formal training with your dev teams, 2/3 of the teams said yes, we already have done at least some training in this space, so I think that, again, that's a work in progress for people. Biggest perceived gaps or risks that are associated with that, trust boundaries were the biggest thing. And so I look at this and I think, you know, when cloud was really getting off the ground, these are the same concerns that we had as people were building net new applications, pushing data into the cloud. Trust boundaries were like sort of top of mind for people. Data management risks, data exposure risks, that was the other big risk issue. So I feel like this is following the patterns of when we started pushing applications into the cloud. It'll likely go through a similar life cycle. So think back or look back on how things took place back at that time, and I think we'll start to see that as well. Finally, a couple of notes on as people are looking to buy or invest in technology that's assisted or supported specifically for security with generative AI type capabilities. So we asked, do people basically want to look to a single vendor to like go after their strategy, or would they like to do a best of breed strategy? A little over half, as you see here, we're leaning more towards trusting a single large vendor to support their needs and help them develop strategies in this space and also deliver capabilities from a security platform versus roughly a third or so would be more selective on picking and choosing individual vendors. When considering a vendor that's delivering these capabilities, these were the top topics that people said were top of mind. One is, like, I want a formal documented process for security and data privacy as part of the development operations process. So this is like, if you're gonna trust the vendor, again, think trust boundary issues, data issues, you gotta know that they are prepared, they're a responsible user of generative AI, and you're gonna be able to trust that. So that's a big trust issue. People also don't wanna lock into like a single LLM. People want an architecture in the environment that supports the use of multiple LLMs. Including open source versions, and I think that's critical as you choose vendors. There's going to be a lot of innovation, a lot of developments that happens fast. You don't want to be left with not being able to tap into that. Thus, the open architecture that can accommodate data from other security vendors as part of the LLM. Super, like this is the open ecosystem versus closed approach, right? So it's great when you have a big vendor who says I do it all, but not with the limits of pulling in all the data from the rest of your security stack. The next two last pieces are really just around history with AI and ML. When we showed up here last year at the show, there wasn't a security vendor on the floor that didn't say, yes, we already do that. So we use AI and ML in some sort of our business. So I think this is, while this is an expected requirement, I don't think it's a big issue for folks. And then lastly, capabilities built on top of these LLMs. So my takeaways for you as you leave here is somewhat mixed, but first, to focus on governance now, like get your house in order, like bring up AI governance within your cybersecurity steering committee. If you don't have a steering committee, start to think about establishing a risk and controls process. By the way, leveraging the NIST CSF 2.0 update that was finally formalized several weeks ago is a great catalyst to be able to go do that, to more formalize, put your governance and risk steering committee together. AI governance should be a top tier priority for you there. Get all your stakeholders involved in the policy definition. Look, everybody's using this across all different parts of your business and business units. Make sure you have cross-functional representation, line of business leaders, tech leaders, and others, and get some agreement about some of these policies in the very, very short term. In the first 3 months following this presentation, I would say, if you're not already, you need to start leveraging your existing security tools infrastructure to deploy some controls in this space, and basic controls around firewalls and the ability to provide access control to the various aspects of what's here. Also, CASB will help you focus on which user groups should have access, shouldn't have access to certain data, UEBA capabilities to look at behaviors, to see what people are doing with that data, to look for suspicious activity. So there's a lot of tech that you already own that can allow you to implement controls in these places. Then as you propose specific policies and controls, you can utilize these mechanisms to implement those. Several of the vendors are implementing or have already announced and are beginning to ship filtering mechanisms, gateways, specialized gateways to filter traffic going to LLMs. And so that's interesting too. But I think you can get a lot of that done with your existing infrastructure. I'm not saying what they're doing isn't use case purpose built, but assess what you have first before running out and investing in those capabilities. And then I would say 6 months from now, you should be fully implemented with policies and controls. To the earlier point of 10% only had governance policies in place. I believe 6 months from now, that number should be at more like 50%. You should be one of them. And then just be clear about your AI plans in your company. Talk to your vendors, flesh out what their plans are. Pick who's going to help guide you through this process. The vendors are running fast here. Leverage that. Call them out on it. Like get past the sort of rhetoric of what could be done. Get specific with them. Pick your vendors. Pick your partners, the right fits for you, and be there in the next 6 months. And then that can help advise your plans. So that's it. That's all the data I have. Thanks for joining me. If anything. Take this as a benchmark for what's happening in the industry. Take it home, consider this against what you're doing, And we'll update this research on a regular basis. You have access to it, so you can take it home. If you want to use it in your investment sessions with your advisors in your company, your steering committees and things, you can at least say, hey, look, other people are doing this. We should be doing these sorts of things too. And here's at least some proof points for you to say what other peer organizations are doing. Thanks for joining me today and hanging in there.